Cyberpunk 2077. Man, I remember when this game's very first trailer dropped and how excited I was, and, well, how excited everybody I knew was. I can remember immediately jumping online and trying to talk to all my friends, and the general consensus was this game's going to be awesome, but when's it going to come out? Next year? 2 years from now? Well, rewatching the trailer now, it ends with the words, coming when it's ready, and we all know that that wasn't necessarily the case. That trailer came out 10 years ago. And I'm happy to say that today, in 2023, the game finally feels like a game worthy of the hype that that very first trailer made me feel. So that original trailer came out in 2013, and pre-orders for Cyberpunk opened in 2019. At that point in time, I was having major flashbacks of games that were released over the last couple of years that were just completely overhyped and underdelivered, like No Man's Sky, Mass Effect Andromeda, Duke Nukem Forever, Star Wars Battlefront Remake, and I really, really was excited for Cyberpunk and didn't want to get disappointed by pre-ordering it and it just being a unfinished mess like all of those games, because it really seemed like that was the direction that the gaming industry was going at that point in time. So I decided to hold off and play it by ear, and I'm glad I did, because I'm sure no one has a problem remembering the horrible state that Cyberpunk was in at launch. And I don't want to harp on that too much. I just, you have to bring it up when you talk about Cyberpunk. And I wanted to make a video where, from the perspective of someone who missed all of that terrible early state that it was in, and what the game is like right now, today, in 2023, and why I think it's a good idea for you to pick it up and try it out. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is a 2023 review of Cyberpunk 2077 and why it's worth your time. So Cyberpunk opens with you choosing one of three different life paths: Nomad, Street Kid, or Corpo. After this choice, you get to make your own character in the game's character creator, which is awesome. There's tons of details and options to really make V exactly how you want them to look. I do wish that there were more options to cyber out my body, become full chrome, maybe have crazy Maelstrom gang eyes, something like that, but I'll take what I can get. There's still a lot of detail here, and you can really make your character look exactly how you want them to look in a cyberpunk world. So after making your character and picking your life path, you're dropped into a 30-minute prologue section that depends on which background you choose. On my first playthrough, I chose the Street Kid background, and on the second, I chose Corpo. I did boot up the game and play through the Nomad opening as well, just to see what that one was like compared to the other two. These openings are all really well made, and they all do a great job of immersing you in Night City almost immediately. But they each accomplish that job in their own unique way. So with Corpo V, you start out in Arasaka Tower, finding yourself throwing up in the bathroom because you're so stressed with your job. And with Street V, you find yourself in a bar, cracking your nose back into place, throwing back shots because you just got almost mugged. Each one just does a good job of really getting you feeling like you're already in Night City, like you're just in a lived-in place. And it just gives you a great sense of like where V grew up. Like he grew up in a rough place. He just almost got mugged, and the way he's dealing with it is sitting in the bar, throwing back shots and just cracking his nose back into place after beating up whoever mugged him. After straightening out V's nose, I ended up accepting a shady job from a rat-like character, and as I was leaving to head to the job, I ran into Padre, a local fixer. Fixers are basically like the gang leaders of Night City. They're the people who get stuff done, and they definitely command respect, as we find Padre seemingly putting a body in his trunk. On the ride over, V and Padre are catching up, as we learn that V has just returned from Night City. He's been away for a little while. The conversation gets interrupted, though, by some borged-out gang member, which V quickly shuts up. So after getting dropped off at the job location, you find the fancy car you're supposed to steal, and boom, the job goes bad. The next thing you get treated to is a short little montage of you getting set up in Night City, and that's pretty much where the game starts. I'm sad to say that this is about where the differences that will occur via your life path end. When I played as a Corpo, I got treated to the same exact opening little montage. I found that every background leads to the same montage. Each of these life paths are cool, and they give you different perspectives of how Night City works, but it was just a little disappointing to see that the only big change that it made in the overall gameplay was opening some extra text dialogue options for you. I feel like CDPR really tried to market this game as a game that you could really become what and who you wanted to be in Night City. But the reality, that just isn't the case. They feel more like when you're playing like a tabletop RPG and you're looking at the backgrounds for your character that you're making, and you choose something like Urchin, Noble, Smuggler, something that gets summarized with a paragraph of text. Except in Cyberpunk, you get to play it for about 30 minutes instead of reading the paragraph. And that's totally fine. I just felt that CDPR was being a little disingenuous by calling them life paths, when in reality, they're just backgrounds for the larger story. Speaking of which, the main story is interesting and engaging too. It really makes you feel like you're part of this big crazy world, but it is a lot more linear than the side missions. The story at its core is a revenge story. You're tasked with your first big shot job, stealing from the biggest, baddest corp in town, Arasaka. Of course, this job also goes wrong and results in you plugging in the Arasaka chip right into your head. And on that chip, turns out, is the soul, digital spirit, engram of legendary rocker boy of Night City, Johnny Silverhand. And now, unfortunately, he's trying to take over your body, and you share a body with him. So everywhere you go, he goes. It's kind of like having a little rocker boy devil on your shoulder. So you better make friends with him quick. The story only gets more crazy from there. But unfortunately, there isn't really much you can do to shake up the main quest lines. If you're really looking for that, then you have to hit the side missions, which, in my opinion, is the real meat and potatoes of this game. Man, the side quests in this game are so good. Every call you get is from a unique and interesting character that results in multiple side missions that all can go multiple different ways and result in romance or open up options for the end of the main storyline. Since the majority of these missions are all character-focused, I want to talk about how great some of the characters are in this game and just highlight why they're cool. So first up on my list is your number one choom himself, Jackie. He's really the first friend you make in NC. The dude is just like the big guy that you always would want to have at your back. He's kind of like the friend that you'd go to a bar and you start drinking with, and then he ends up being the one that gets you into a fight. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. From the first actual conversation V has with Jackie, it just feels like you can trust him. You know he's got your back no matter what. Going on missions with him is just such a pleasure. Listening to him weave in and out of English with a little Spanish thrown in, just cursing at all the enemies. You just really get a sense of the kind of person he is. A tough but emotional guy who just wants to take care of those close to him and achieve a better life through the streets.
Maybe now, as God ordained. Jackie Wells.
Next up is the road queen herself, Panam. Man, what can I say about her? She's crafty, she lives pedal to metal, and she speaks her mind and is loyal to a fault. Her missions are some of my favorite in the whole game by far. Her questline revolves around helping the Aldecaldos, who are like a pseudo Mad Max desert group of nomads, and it's really just fun. I mean, you run around with them, salvaging cool tech, you get revenge on someone who stole a ride, and it all really culminates with stealing a hover tank from a train. And that tank, let me tell you, that tank has 99% better handling than anything else in the whole game that you can drive. I love this questline. I find myself calling Panam and Mitch and the others just to try to get them to give me more quests. I had such a blast hanging out with them. I ended up spending just as much time really out in the Badlands with them as I did in the city, because the Aldecaldos just have such a strong group of characters that you just makes you want to be out there with them. So I highly recommend doing Panam's questline.
I don't know. Shit! Alright, deal.
That's not to say that the city doesn't have its own host of awesome characters. Delamain and his side missions are a little more run-of-the-mill, but the contents of the mission is just awesome and hilarious. It made me laugh more than once. Basically, Delamain's an AI cab company, and he operates throughout Night City. And he has an accident that ends up splitting his personality all up into, different personalities. So like happiness, sadness, anxiety. And you have to run around the city finding the pieces of his personality and get them to come back home to Daddy Del. I loved the banter that B got to have with Delamain in this questline. All of his personality offshoots were all funny and acted accordingly. It really personified him, and in the end, it ends up asking you big questions like, what does it mean to be alive? With your choices actually affecting how Del will be for the rest of the game. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there's a really good Easter egg in this side mission as well. This one's definitely worth seeing through.
Welcome on board this Delamain service. With Delamain, you leave your problems at the door.
Son of a bitch. Better fucking believe I will.
Next up is Judy. She's a character you get to meet in the first part of the game. She's a BD, or brain dance editor. Brain dances are basically how people watch porn in this game. It lets you sort of live through someone else's eyes or see an experience through someone else's eyes. And she edits those. She works for the Mox, which is this awesome gang of sex workers, anarchists, and straight-up punks that run and protect Lizzie's Bar, which is basically a sex work hotspot in Night City. Lizzie's Bar has a tumultuous history with gang members, and it's kind of a violent past. And it results in none of the sex workers really being treated fairly there, and that's really what Judy cares about. She wants to make sure her sex work friends are cared for and, well, just treated like people. Is that really so much to ask? Well, helping her out results in you sort of hatching a pseudo-rebellion with her and some of the other sex workers to try to get them into a better place. It's really cool, and it has a very satisfying conclusion.
Gotta be something I can do about it.
Like what?
River Ward is another character you can run into in the city. He's an NCPD detective who's really just trying to do the right thing. You meet him after taking a job from a mayoral candidate for Night City. He takes you on a noir-esque set of missions that start with you collecting evidence and trying to get answers about a possible political assassination cover-up. If that doesn't intrigue you, I don't know what will. This mission's awesome. It's a cool break from the other missions in Night City, and it's really just provides something different. I had a lot of fun scanning around and trying to collect evidence and figure out what really happened. And you can find some cool Easter eggs in this mission line as well, if that's your thing. Of course, I have to talk about my boy Goro Takamura, the man, the myth, the Japanese cyber dad. This guy's great. He has such a distaste for Night City, but continues to work with you because of the circumstances of the main story. He really grew on me. He's a smart and shrewd man, but completely out of his element on the streets of Night City. It's almost like cute in a way that it almost makes him seem helpless because he's so uncomfortable here. His snide remarks and his reactions to the sights, sounds, and food of NC never really failed to make me laugh or put a smile on my face. I liked having him at my back.
What is this? Hey, yakitori.
And I'm just scratching the surface here. I highly, highly, highly recommend playing through all these side missions. Play through every one that you can. I played through just about every one of them thinking, this is going to be the last one, and then I'll do the last mission of the game. I couldn't help myself. Each and every one drew me in for different reasons. You won't be disappointed in taking the time to do these missions. There's so much to see and do in this game, but you really need to take the time to do all the side missions. Oh yeah, last but certainly not least, we got to talk about the rocker boy himself, Johnny Silverhand. At first I thought I was going to hate having Keanu Reeves in my head 24/7. I mean, he already lives there rent-free from the John Wick movies. I thought he was going to be more Na'vi.
Hey, listen!
And not as good as Ellie from The Last of Us. I'm happy to say that he carves out his own place in the pantheon of video game partner characters, though. He adds a lot of extra dimension and depth when he shows up, like a little devil on your shoulder. You really get a good sense of who he was when he was alive, his disdain for Arasaka, and why he has that disdain. His rockstar lifestyle really comes across through his dialogue, too. And, of course, his love-hate relationship with Night City. He'll pop in and out for various reasons throughout the game, and sometimes saying things that will end up influencing your decisions. I know it definitely influenced my choices, which is actually pretty cool when you think about it, since the main story is about Johnny slowly taking over V, and you two becoming more and more alike. Eventually, if you help him out enough, you can even become close enough to get to know him beyond his spiky punk exterior.
Test of a person's true value? Death. Facing it, staring it down. You still got a chance to be somebody.
The story, including the side missions, is really something to adore. It works well and succeeds in telling V's story, along with the stories of all the other characters you run into in Night City. But it does feel a little mismatched with the gameplay elements sometimes. I get the feeling that this game was originally designed to have some of the diversity in how you approach gameplay situations like that of the original Deus Ex, which is one of my favorite games of all time. And it succeeds in doing that for the most part, but where it begins to feel a little mismatched to me is how linear the story is. It just doesn't match the sheer freedom that you have in the combat. I just wish I was able to make more impactful choices in the main story and maybe have it branch out and have different things happen based on your choices, sort of like Mass Effect. Or, like I said earlier, have the life paths have a larger effect on the main story than just extra dialogue options. There's so much data spread out throughout the game, I just think it would have been cool to implement some other small things like that of the original Deus Ex. Like, maybe you could find a password that was a kill code for a cyber psycho or a boss or something like that, and you could just utter it to them in dialogue and have their heads explode. But I can't really complain too much, seeing as I ended up completing damn near every mission in the whole game and even loading saves to try out other dialogue options. I just found myself really enthralled with all the characters and wanting to see everything through to the end. Gameplay. Man, whatever the story lacked in diversity, oh boy, does it make up for it in the gameplay department. It feels like you can do whatever you want in this game, from the skill trees to the cybernetic implants to the weapon choice. You can fight exactly how you want to fight. Early on, I found myself dreaming of riding Eternal, all shiny and chrome. I really wanted to embrace my inner cyber psycho and just become completely chromed out. So I really focused on building a monowire Sandevestein monster, and I had an absolute blast with that build. It was so OP. I got to the point where I could just slow time down, run into an area, and slice everybody's heads off before they even knew I was there. It was a very satisfying way to be able to just play with this kind of freedom. I was obsessed with making enough scratch to hunting down rare implants to augment my body to the fullest. But this is the only one way to play. You want to be a shotgun-wielding, grenade-hurling maniac? You can do it. You want to be a netrunner who distracts, hacks, and shocks from the shadows? You can do it. I loved playing with the combat system. It feels like a big combat sandbox. But with that said, the encounters and bosses aren't particularly challenging. I think I only found myself flatlining 1 or 2 times in sparse encounters, but I actually think that this is a strength of the game. It allows you to live out that power fantasy. Combat encounters feel less like a roadblock or obstacle and more like a sandbox to try out your crazy OP builds on. I mean, just look at YouTube. There are tons and tons of videos of people showing off crazy builds and how devastating they are as they hop around killing entire groups of enemies before anyone even knew they were there. If you ever have played Bulletstorm, it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. I think the combat is more about being flashy and ridiculous than it is to just be outright challenging, and that's not a problem. In fact, it works really well, especially with how excellent all the weapons feel. There's a wide variety, and there's plenty of iron and steel to go around. It's a bit like a looter shooter in that regard. All the guns feel powerful and sound great, and with certain builds, you can even go full slow motion John Wick style, sliding around, clicking heads like full-on Matrix. Or you can use heavy weaponry and walk forward like an impenetrable tank, tearing through your enemies without even giving it a second thought. The combat system really just allows you to run wild and show Night City what you're made of in your own personal way. Speaking of Night City, let's talk about how absolutely breathtaking it is. It feels like a living, breathing place with people actually living in it, from the bustling streets to the bright neon signs advertising God knows what. For me, it's really the small details that sell it. Each area of Night City feels distinct in terms of geography and style, from the reverse gentrified Pacifica, which was meant to be a rich shopping area for corpos but never got finished and is now a large, sprawling slum, to the sharp, cold, and rich vibe of the skyscrapers littering city center, where all the corpos live and work. There's a lot of really cool touches beyond that as well that just continue to build the immersion. For example, each area has a specific demographic and gang that controls that part of the city. And on top of that, each gang is also culturally diverse in its own way, from speaking different languages to style. Each one really has its own flair and makes each one very distinct. Some of my favorite moments in Night City happen to just be speeding through the streets on a rainy night or a bright morning as I zoom by the giant signs and buildings littered throughout the city. It just gives that unmistakable blend of high-tech and capitalist dystopia. It just hits all the right notes of how you would expect Night City to look and feel, even with the wonky driving. One thing I wish they would have done a little more with is the trauma team. I feel like we really barely ever get to see them. And it would have been cool, you know, if you're like driving along the street or you accidentally kill a civilian, maybe that person had a trauma team package and the trauma team runs in and tries to kill you and save the person. Something like that I just think would have been a cool touch. There wasn't too many glitches, but I did have a few instances of NPCs populating NC and they were all just like the same NPC or mostly the same person. I know this can happen in a lot of games, but for some reason it did really stand out to me in this one. But beyond that, there really wasn't that many instances of immersion breaking things happening. There is a variety of side content as well in the game. There's NCPD events, which are just basically small distractions where you'll go kill a group of enemies. And my personal favorite, the Cyberpsycho sightings, which are basically little stories told through these Cyberpsychos. So you'd go to an area, find a group of bodies, and scan them and read some documents and try to figure out why the Cyberpsycho died. And they also double as like mini boss fights, and all the Cyberpsychos are unique and distinct. They're always worth exploring and finding. And plus, you get some pretty sweet cyber gear to go with it, so you can continue to augment yourself even further. Well, that just about covers everything. This game, when it first released, may not have been what everyone was expecting, but I can say without a doubt that it's worth diving into now, especially if you have a love for all things cyberpunk, Blade Runner, anything that fits in that genre. Like I said earlier, when I first started playing this game, I really wasn't sure how it was going to be going into it. I thought it would just, go through the main storyline and be done with it. But I was wrong. I ended up playing multiple times, all the missions. I just found myself spending more and more time in Night City, completing all the side missions, hunting down the psychos. It really just felt like I couldn't get enough. So I can say faithfully that now's a great time to get into Cyberpunk if you're interested, especially with the anime out, which is awesome, and the new DLC coming out soon. I don't think there could be a better time to jump in than now. I'm happy to say that Cyberpunk is worth your time, and you should play it if you get the chance. You won't regret it.